Ahoy, and welcome to another Into the Terminal. Today, we're going to be doing in-place upgrades. So, Nate, why would somebody want an in-place upgrade?
So it's been a while since we talked about in-place upgrades, almost like 3 years ago when the last release of RHEL came out, right?
Fair enough.
So why would you do an in-place upgrade? Well, you've got important machines that are doing important things, and migrating is sometimes not something that's desirable, right? So an in-place upgrade might be the right path forward for you.
Yeah, and when I've talked with folks, a lot of times and Nate and I have both done a bunch of upgrade migrations over time, and
Oh yeah.
typically it was like you stood up a new box in the new version, and then you had to move all your data and apps over. And then there was always that one thing where it's like, oh yeah, remember that time 3 years ago when we changed that NTP configuration file? Whoops.
And everybody forgot about it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then our SSL certs got 5 minutes out of date and it broke the service for a while.
Now, admittedly, like good documentation and good planning can avoid those things, but it's always good to have options. Really, is the way I always pitch in-place upgrades. Right? I am personally a migrate fan over an in-place upgrade fan, just because I feel like it's a great time to refresh the system and get all that cruft and make sure everything is in a good state. But I can also really understand the draw to an in-place upgrade, depending on what that machine does and how critical it is.
Yeah. And so we'll be talking more about some of the concerns and like things that you should pay attention to when doing in-place upgrades in the deeper dive. But why don't we jump into the terminal and we'll start this thing going?
Yeah, let's get that going. Let me find the right one here. Now you have two screen shares. Let's see if I get it right. Did I get the right one?
There we go.
Yay! We have a lot of balls juggling at the moment, guys. Bear with us.
Yeah, we do. We have many machines because in-place upgrades can actually take a little bit of time, and we don't want to. We don't want to like spend a bunch of our episode time watching scroll bars and stuff, right? So we have several machines that we can flip between them to show different things while stuff is happening. All right. So to start with in-place upgrades, you need to install the right software. So what you want is LEAPP, and we're doing a RHEL 9 to RHEL 10 LEAPP upgrade today. So we're going to install the LEAPP upgrade EL9 to EL10 package. And I'll just go ahead and throw on a -y. This will install a couple of other things like a Python module and some dependency stuff, and we're good there. But what you get out of it is a command called LEAPP. So we can do things like pre-upgrade. So when you're doing a in-place upgrade, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we put into place to make sure that you're as successful as you can be using this in-place upgrade tool. And one of the critical things is going to be doing a pre-upgrade analysis of this system. And so one of the options for LEAPP is to perform this pre-upgrade report. And we'll show this in just a minute. And we'll talk about more of the stuff in the pre-upgrade report in the deeper dive. But essentially, it'll kind of like highlight things that we think you should pay attention to. And some of them may be things that we say you have to fix before you can upgrade. And some of them might be like, you should pay attention to this, or some of them might be when the system is upgraded, you really need to do these additional activities as well, right? So the whole point is to try and like give you a better holistic picture of your system and what you will need to do as an administrator for not only performing the upgrade, but also having a good experience post-upgrade. So let me go ahead and start it running. And we've actually already got the report on another box. So I'll show that to you in just a second. But it's doing things like checking the configuration of your machine. It's going to look at the packages installed on your machine. It's going to look for things that it doesn't recognize And then it's going to take all that and kind of packages it up into a report. And so it has this nice like output here. It also stores all this output in a log file. So if you're not reading the screen, you can always refer to the log file as well. There's also a cockpit plugin for Leap. So you can actually use Web Console for performing your upgrades. And one of the things that comes out of this is not only a text-based report, but also an HTML formatted report. So the HTML formatted report is, quite frankly, a little bit easier to read. And so if you're interested in something a little bit easier on the eyes, the HTML report or looking at the report through Cockpit might be an easier method. We, of course, are in the terminal. So we're going to be doing the text report.
I mean, it's in our name.
Exactly.
We can't not be.
We can't not be.
We can't not be in the terminal. Except on those rare occasions where we're not in the terminal, which 2 weeks ago we didn't have as much terminal as maybe we could have. There was like Git repositories, there was like web UIs, all kinds of stuff. You missed it.
So I went ahead and flipped to my other system. All right, so this one has already had the Leap pre-upgrade report executed. And at the end of the execution, it gives you this kind of little synopsis at the bottom, right? The report summary. And then it tells you down here, whoop, let me unlock the system. Right here. Right, there's your text file of your report. All right, but let's talk about the report summary real quick. We'll actually go into the report details in the deeper dive.
Yeah.
So the report summary was an error, right? So we were running the Leap pre-upgrade command and something happened and it was not able to successfully complete, right? That's an error. An inhibitor. So this is something that if you do not remediate it, when you try to Leap upgrade, the Leap upgrade will fail to execute and tell you it cannot progress until you fix this condition, this inhibiting condition. It's a blocker, essentially, for the upgrade.
Yeah, it actually won't even let you. You can't even force the upgrade. It says no.
Right. Because we know that if that condition hasn't been satisfied, it will lead to a poor experience either through the tool or with the upgraded machine. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so Red Hat marks those as inhibitors, right? Blockers for doing the upgrade. And then we have these other items. And this is what we'll be taking a look at in the first part of the deeper dive. So these are things that we recognized about the system that we think you should know about. And 3 of them are what we think are high priority things that you should know about, look at, or address. One of them is medium, a couple are low, and then there's a few things that like you just might want to know about your system, right? That's the info severity reports. And so these, when you look at them in the report file, actually have a much larger description about what it is, the findings. Sometimes they will suggest remediations for you. And so that's where I think you spend a lot of your time with Leap. So Nate, do we want to just kick off a Leap upgrade and let it run? Because it also has a lot of boringness while we talk about some of these other things.
So let's bring up yet another share here, because we're gonna let this upgrade run while we're reviewing the Scott's report, and we can't exactly review the report on a system that's being upgraded. So here we are, and this is pretty simple. This is just a virtual machine in my lab here. You might recognize this from episode 137, where we did rear upgrade or rear backups and restores, which is why the name is 137. Anyway, I picked it because it's a RHEL 9 box that I knew was not already, a RHEL 10 box in my lab. So anyway, this is actually really simple. You run the Leap tool again with the word upgrade. And just like Scott did it with pre-upgrade, now what it's going to do is it's going to rerun the pre-upgrade anyway. Even though you've already done the pre-upgrade, it still leads with the pre-upgrade. Now, I don't know. I haven't run a pre-upgrade on this machine. Maybe it would skip it if I already had one and it knew that. I'm not sure. But it will exit the upgrade if it finds any inhibitors at this point.
Well, and that's why it runs again, right? Because we have to make
Yeah,
sure that you actually addressed all of those things. So we're going to run the tool, the reporting again, to make sure that there are no inhibitors left that we should bail out on.
right. So once this finishes, you're probably going to see a similar set of a similar list to what Scott just showed us in the pre-upgrade. But there shouldn't be any inhibitors because there was one on this machine, which I've already fixed. And that one was that on RHEL 9 systems, maybe not in all cases, but in my case, there was a lingering IFCFG file from the old network scripts deployments, which I think was there for compatibility purposes. And I had to remove that on this system before it would let me upgrade. That's literally the only change I made. And then I'm rerunning the upgrade. And here we go. It's already downloading packages. So.
And Nate, I actually like to run leap upgrade dash reboot because then I can unattend it and it'll just like do things.
I didn't want to miss the reboot for folks watching. That's why I did not add that flag.
All right. So don't forget to mash that like and subscribe button. We're about to start delving more depth into that pre-upgrade report and some of the findings that it found and how we could address them. And then we'll just let Nate's upgrade kind of cook as we move along, and we'll answer any questions from the audience. So don't forget to mash that like and subscribe. We'll see you in just a second.
Just a second.
All right. Yeah, well, apparently for the defer viewers, they actually don't even see that little animation.
It's like nothing.
So literally for them, it was a pass through. All right. So as promised, let's take a closer look at this this answer file, or not answer file, at the report. So let's take a look at less var log leap report. Okay, so this is where we tell you things about your box that we think are important. So the first thing, and remember I had, I think, 3 high priority things. The first thing is when we were looking at the box, we found out that there are several kernel modules loaded that are no longer maintained in RHEL 10. So when you do your upgrade, these device drivers aren't maintained anymore. Now, depending on what it is, we actually may remove that device driver entirely from the kernel. For these, however, it has just gone into an unmaintained status, which means we still ship them with the RHEL kernel, but they're unsupported and unmaintained. So if they break, we don't fix them. So these specifically are networking ones. This box is a virtual machine, and it uses the Intel E1000 gigabit Ethernet driver for its networking. And I've tested it, and it turns out that it works fine on RHEL 10 already. But that's why that one is highlighted, right? Here are some kernel drivers, and the reason that's important is that if the kernel driver doesn't work on RHEL 10, that's a hardware that will no longer be functional on your machine. So imagine if you upgraded your machine, all of a sudden you couldn't do networking anymore. That'd be kind of scary. Probably not good. So that's why we mark it as a high. But because we know we ship unmaintained drivers with the kernel, we're not making this an inhibitor, meaning you can't perform the upgrade. We're just letting you know that you need to pay extra special attention here. One might even stand up a box and do a test to make sure that it worked on the other side before upgrading this production box with this condition. All right, the second one is talking about grub. So it says that we can't do something with the bootloader because we're changing from grub 2, or changing to grub 2. And so we can't update it automatically. And so after your machine has finished the upgrade, we think you should check your grub configuration, and you may even need to run grub 2 install to reinstall the grub bootloader in your master boot record, right? So again, you could go into emergency or into rescue mode if this was a problem and run this, but we're telling you, hey, this may be a problem. Be prepared to run grub 2 install after the upgrade. All right, the third thing. We found non-Red Hat RPMs on your machine. And then it gives you the
How dare
list.
you?
Right. The list is EPEL release. And
Mm.
sure enough, that's not a Red Hat RPM, right? That's from the extra packages for Enterprise Linux community. Now, EPEL release is version specific, right? So if I just leave this in place, if I try to install software from EPEL on my RHEL 10 box, it's going to be trying to pull things from the RHEL 9 extra packages for Enterprise Linux repository.
Yep.
Right? But this is, I think, the place where in-place upgrades are the most dangerous, because let's say we do all the Red Hat things exactly perfectly. And generally that's true. We have no idea what these packages are, or if you have to upgrade them or replace them with a different version, or maybe there's a completely different software package that has to be put in place of this thing. And so that's why this high report item is worth your attention, because you need to figure out what these are, what they do, and whether they'll work on the upgraded RHEL box, or you'll have to do something post upgrade.
Imagine if instead of just being EPEL, this is, your antivirus agents or your compliance scanning tools or, your workload. Maybe this is a database server that you have from a third party. Maybe this is some other thing, right? That provided you an RPM repository. Now, LEAPP provides hooks in the pre and post where you can do things like remove this repository before the upgrade, perform the upgrade, and then add a newer version of said repository in after the upgrade, right? We're not going to demonstrate those today, but they do exist, and you'd have to look them up in the documentation for LEAPP.
And actually, right here, it tells you about that.
There you go.
We call them actors, LEAPP actors.
There you go.
And so you can put essentially scripts or automation to do stuff to your machines either before you upgrade them or after you upgrade them automatically. And this is important when you're doing things like fleets, right? So Nate and I are just doing one box today, right?
Yeah.
But if I had 30 boxes that were just like this one, would I want to run the report and mitigate the things and then run LEAPP upgrade 30 times in a row? Or would I rather spend a little time writing an upgrade actor so that I can essentially address any of the concerns, like maybe remove EPEL release and install EPEL release 10 post upgrade, so that all my 30 boxes, that just happens to, and that guidance gets addressed. All right, let's go a little bit further. So those are the highs. Nate, you noticed this medium one today. I thought we might talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at chat for a second. Is this the the libdb? Just a second here. I was mid-sentence. Yeah, so this is a warning because libdb was deprecated in RHEL 9. However, it could still be in use on a RHEL 9 system because it's not removed yet. But in RHEL 10, it's removed. So in my case, I tried to remove libdb just to see what packages were dependent on it. And in my case, the only thing that was dependent was sudo. And I don't know if that meant that was actually a hard dependency or not, but I sort of took a leap of faith and figured if we know it's deprecated and we know it went away, it's probably going to do a conversion if it really required it while it's mid upgrade. In your case, in anybody's case, right, you're going to want to look into what it is that requires libdb on your system if you do in fact have it. And if you're using it, the knowledge base article linked there lets you know basically how to perform a migration. Or no, the migration is here in the remediation hint with that conversion tool. Now, that conversion is going to be application specific, right? If you have a custom application that is using libdb, this is going to take some thought. You're going to have to work through why you need it and what you need it for and how to convert that.
Yeah,
There's a replacement package for libdb. It's an acronym that I can't remember now off the top of my head, but it's linked in that knowledge base article.
And so for Nate's example of sudo required libdb, again, Red Hat's going to update the Red Hat things. So the sudo for RHEL 10 is not going to use libdb because resolve that. But if you were using libdb as a database backend for some application, you need to know that this doesn't exist in RHEL 10 anymore. And that may mean that you should not do the upgrade because it's not going to be there. So that application that uses it may not function on the new version. Or it might need some refactoring, right? So you just delay while you refactor your stuff and maybe use a different database backend.
And this may be one of those cases where in-place upgrade is not right? Depending on why you needed libdb. And it could be that migration is the right path, right?
All right. Did I mess it up? I messed it up.
I don't know what you did, but you brought mine back up. Did you end your share?
There we go.
You did.
I did. I was on the wrong box, pressing cursor characters. All right. Then we get into the lows, right? So this low, hey, for the upgrade, we're going to switch SELinux mode to permissive. So post upgrade, you'll want to set it back to enforcing if it's not in enforcing. Okay, cool. I can do that after the upgrade. We're going to change the subscription manager release, and it's going to say that this box is a RHEL 10 box after the upgrade. Okay, that's cool. And then
that's unacceptable. I want my RHEL 10 box to think it's a RHEL 9 box. Come on.
So this box has we are not going to upgrade any of the software that's provided by these Red Hat repos. So if you've installed stuff from Code Ready Builder or Beta, we're not going to know about it or upgrade it, right? Typically, LEAPP looks at the base OS and AppStream software repositories from Red Hat. And that's the kind of scope in which we operate for LEAPP upgrades. The more additional repos we add in, the more complexity that there can be in the package mapping and a variety of other things. The LEAPP team tries to constrain that craziness a bit by looking at base OS and AppStream. All right, and then the other couple of infos, there will be an SELinux relabeling after the upgrade, which is cool because we put it in permissive mode, and we may have installed new software with new files, so we'll do a relabeling. And then this one was, I was kind of surprised at this one, that my machine will automatically be registered with Insights after the upgrade. But notice it says that you can use the --no-insights-register command line option with your LEAPP upgrade command, and it will skip this one.
There you go.
So, even though it's an info, right? I had to read all the way through to find out all the things that were interesting or important to me.
But Scott, you should register with Insights because it is really helpful. What are you afraid of?
Yes. And when I ran my upgrades, I did not use this no insights register option. It was just something that I had not thought about. And
no, I get it. It is great that it calls it out. Generally, we don't try to make decisions for people that they can't undo. And, I like that it calls it out there. It's good. Because there are definitely cases, especially in like disconnected cases, I can't connect my system to Insights, so please don't try. Right?
All right. So that's a little bit on the report. And Nate, you said your upgrade complete.
So we are ready for reboot. Now, what you did not see, and I don't know, can I scroll back? I can scroll back, is a whole bunch. Essentially, this upgrade comes down to a bunch of DNF updates or DNF replaces for various files, right? Now, I'm sure there's other minutia that goes on in the background, but the bulk of it is that it's reinstalling or replacing all the packages on the system from the RHEL 9 version to the RHEL 10 version, right? In some cases, that's changing versions. In some cases, maybe it isn't. But kernel and everything gets updated. And then at the end, basically what you have to do is reboot. Now, remember, it said it was going to do that SELinux relabel, so that we're going to have to wait for that to happen at the first reboot. So do not panic if your system takes a while to reboot. It will take a while to reboot. So let's just go ahead and start that reboot, and you can see, so we can talk over it instead of me talking and then us waiting in silence.
Yeah, because there's actually a whole bunch of post or additional upgrade things that have to happen on the machine, right? We install all the software, but now there's all the other things that go around that.
Yeah, if we catch it, we'll see in the bootloader that it actually shows there's a new bootloader entry that's a special init ramfs that it'll boot into to finish a portion of the upgrade, and then it reboots into the actual RHEL 10 init ramfs and does more work after that. So yeah, it's a little complicated, involved, I guess I should say.
All right. So there were a bunch of questions in the chat. Why don't we start addressing some of those while we're watching the second stage of the upgrade?
Yeah, we could try that. There was some questions around the libdb thing. I shouldn't say questions, but somebody suggested a replacement. That is not the one that's in our knowledge base, though. LMDB was their suggestion. There's another one that's in our knowledge base article that I'd have to go look up, and I didn't take the note down. So there was conversation around what do you do if the upgrade goes poorly, right? Like what happens if on the other side of this you have a non-functional system? I don't know if you have a better suggestion to that than I did.
So this is a non-reversible process.
Right.
So like if it bailed out right here in Nate's, we would be left with kind of a mangled machine.
Right.
It's our recommendation that when you're doing LEAPP upgrades, you first make a full and complete backup of your target system, such that you could restore from that backup to get to your machine state prior to the upgrade happening.
Right.
These are test boxes for us, so we didn't do that.
Honestly, I did. I've upgraded this particular system 3 times now. But I did exactly what you might do on a production system. I took a VM snapshot before I started. So I got the thing all ready for upgrade, and then I took a snapshot so that I could revert it and redo it for the demonstration today. That's exactly what you could do in a production environment. Take a snapshot, and if it goes poorly, you revert to the snapshot.
Well, for virtual machines, yes, because that's what you do.
Right.
For metal boxes, not so much.
Yeah.
Where your backup solution is what you want to do there to make a
right
and reproducible system before you start this non-reversible process.
Now, I swore that at one point there was a recovery option in LEAPP, but Rick was kind enough to go look it up for me and verified that there is not, at least not currently. Maybe I'm thinking of convert to RHEL. Is there a rollback in convert to RHEL maybe? I don't know. I swear one of these tools had a rollback.
Yeah, convert to RHEL has a couple of places where it stops and says, are you sure you want to continue? And if you say, no, I don't want to continue, it will revert back to revert all the changes it had made up until that point. But
maybe
even with
what I was thinking of,
it's to a point where it's going to do the conversion, and once the conversion starts, like you can't reverse it back again.
Right.
So I did see some questions about air gap leaps. So essentially, this machine is using the RHEL 10 software available to it through Subscription Manager. So these boxes are registered with the Red Hat CDN or Red Hat Customer Portal, and that's where it's pulling its installation source. If you're using a satellite server, it can pull RHEL 10 content and do LEAPP upgrades off of your satellite server. If you don't have a satellite server, you can stand up a private RHEL 10 software repo, and you could perform a LEAPP upgrade off of that software repo. But it's going to use the repo definitions that are in the system that you're upgrading. And you may need to make some changes to point it at something private.
the important thing to remember here is that it's not using any special repository to get upgrade content. It is just the RHEL 10 content. So
Right.
I would think to do an upgrade, what you would simply need is local copies of the RHEL 9 content to make sure you could install the LEAPP tooling, right? And then local copies of the RHEL 10 content so that when it does its switch, it'll switch, right?
And I think you may have to do a little bit of configuration change to Leap to tell it to point to your internal private copy repo
Right.
rather than somewhere else.
Right.
Um,
But again, if that internal private copy is a satellite, it should be pretty easy. I think there's like a content view
oh,
switch you have to do and boom.
satellite should just work.
Yeah.
Right? It's more like you've made your own repos, your own private repos, not using
Yeah.
satellite. You have to do a little bit extra work.
If you can't simply run a subscription manager command to switch that repository, then you're going to have to do something special to switch, right? Dropping in a different yum repos D file or something, right? But if it's satellite or the CDN, then subscription manager should be able to handle it, which
Yep.
is what the Leap tool uses.
I see that the same person, Mr. Professor YT, also asked how would you do 1,000 servers using this tool? So as we talked about earlier, like if you have a bunch of servers, you don't want to manually have to run the upgrade analysis and other stuff on them. So what I would do is first I would break my 1,000 servers up into groups, one so that you can manage the upgrades a little bit more atomically, right? If you do a group of 100, it won't take a long time. You won't have to do a whole bunch of validation, right? If you do all 1,000, the additional steps afterward may be a lot of your time, right? So break them up into smaller bite-size amounts that you can do in like a day, right? A work day. The other thing is across your 1,000 boxes, maybe those 1,000 boxes do different things. So when you're breaking them up into smaller pieces, you might be like, oh, these are my Postgres database ones. And because they all look the same, I'll do them as a group. And these are
Right.
my Apache web server ones. And because they all pretty much look the same, I'll do them as a group. So that you can then make any actors that you need or write any scripts that you need or customize any Ansible playbooks to run before or after the upgrade has occurred, so that you can address any specific things about those boxes that all look the same. You can do Leap upgrades in Insights. You can do Leap upgrades in Satellite, and that may give you a better interface into like your inventory of systems. And you can group them and do groups of upgrades using those management tools as well.
I don't know. I would just hire 1,000 interns and assign each one a server.
Oh, so you'd have your machine done in days? That sounds terrible.
I don't know. I didn't hear if you mentioned it, but there's also Ansible. There's Ansible playbooks that can do the Leap upgrade. You said
Yeah,
satellite and Insights. I didn't know if you said Ansible.
well, Ansible is like a tool that you can use for performing those pre and post actions. I don't think AAP does Leap upgrades natively. I think it's more like the Ansible playbooks to run on boxes.
I thought there was an Ansible module that would run a Leap upgrade. And I think Rick mentioned it in the chat as well. I've never used it, but I think it exists.
Yeah, and we've actually done several of these like large scale upgrades for customers, and our professional services folks use a lot of Ansible, and they do the same things I was just talking about, right? They kind of survey the population, try to determine which boxes look similar, write automation so that they can do those upgrades in a sane fashion in a similar way, and then they perform them, and eventually they get it all upgraded for the customer. So if you're interested, like you can also pay someone to do these things for you.
Right. So our system has finished rebooting. I think it rebooted twice while we were talking. I wasn't watching it closely enough, but it did come back to a login prompt, and here we go. I've logged in, and you can see that Etsy Red Hat release tells us that it's RHEL 10. Let's see if I get into root and then do... If I do a get enforce, you see that it is in fact permissive, so I could now just set enforce it back. I don't know, did it change it in the config file? Yes, well, so you'd have to change the config file back to enforcing as well. I would recommend reviewing the SELinux audit log before you did that, though, right? Because if there is an application on here that for some reason is not happy after the upgrade and it's not happy because of SELinux contexts, you're going to want to know that while it's in permissive mode, which could be another reason why it's left in permissive mode after the upgrade.
Yeah, I think by and large we do pretty well. Where we get into weirdness is like if you've done policy customizations on your box.
Yeah.
Well, we just upgraded the policy to the RHEL 10 policy. It's not going to know
Yep.
about those customizations.
Or, third-party applications that may have been removed and reinstalled during the upgrade process or upgraded to a newer version. It's better to be cautious, right? So making SELinux permissive during the upgrade means that the workload will be in a state where you can troubleshoot it afterward instead of it being down because of some unknown SELinux problem.
Right. And I think that's the other thing is, great, we upgraded, but now you get to do all the validation and making sure that all stuff is working the way that you expect, right? So if this is a database server, you're checking your database data, right? And connecting to it and looking at the table space and like running queries against to make sure that it's coming back with the data you expect. And then once you've validated it, now you can throw it back into the general system population for use. All right. Any other interesting questions?
Just Shantanu gloating that they mentioned Ansible at the beginning, and now we talked about Ansible. But it was put in my brain because they mentioned it earlier. I don't know if there's much more in the way of questions. Wait, there's one here about MySQL. Let me read this thing here quick.
Oh, Shantanu asked, is there a DNF way to erase a package without touching dependencies? And I don't think there's a DNF way. There's certainly an RPM way to do that.
Yeah.
That's what you wanted. I would use RPM to erase --nodeps to leave the dependencies in place.
All right. So Satyam asks, quick one. I have MySQL 8.0.21 in a RHEL 7.9 to RHEL 8 MySQL instance. Was installed using a tar file. Yeah. And when I check the pre-upgrade, it shows that the RHEL package, it shows that it's not a RHEL package. So will it be removed after upgrade? I don't think it'll be removed because the upgrade process doesn't have a way to remove it because you installed it with a tar file and the upgrade process works with DNF and RPM. Will it work? That's the big question because it will have been built against different libraries than RHEL 8 uses, right? So if you untarred it and built it from source, which is what I'm picturing if it came from a tar file, I don't think it'll work after the upgrade. You're going to have to reinstall it or install the RPM version.
Yeah, I would be highly dubious that thing would work post-upgrade for reasons of different libraries provided. So for there, what I would suggest is you grab a backup of your database because MySQL tends to be pretty resilient in terms of data structure. So
yeah, the database binary files are relatively portable as long as you're not majorly changing the version of MySQL underneath it.
Yeah, and then when you get to your RHEL 8, install MySQL there, and then put your database back into the MySQL database there. Grabbing software that's not packaged makes things really hard.
Yeah.
And generally I recommend against that.
We get it though, right? There's some cases where there isn't an RPM and you really need this thing. However, MySQL, MariaDB, they're not like that case, right? You can easily get those from the official Red Hat repositories or third-party repositories, right? Supported repositories from third parties that do additional database support stuff. I don't really see a reason why you'd be building it from source, but who knows? Maybe there's something. Maybe there's a flag you needed that's not included. I don't know.
I think it's more they wanted a newer version of MySQL
Possible.
than what we provided with RHEL 7. And so they pulled it down and compiled it and did the things with the newer version.
Right.
My answer to that would be like, run the newer version of RHEL and get the newer version of MySQL. That way you don't have to deal with this weirdness of compiled or unzipped binaries randomly existing on your file system. Shane Archibald asks, let me ask you this. Where can someone get a free download or trial of RHEL 10? So there's a couple places. We actually do have a software trial, which is a 60-day access. I would recommend against that because it's 60 days. Like, that's not a long time. Instead, we have a couple of developer subscription options. So the one that's been around for a long, long time is Red Hat developer subscription for individuals. And so if you're a person and you just want to try something out, and you want to run your home lab, or you want to do some like startup-y stuff, and it might even be production, it gives you 16 boxes of RHEL for free.
Right. Without support.
Yes, it's
important note, right?
It is self-support, but it gives you all the things that a Red Hat RHEL subscription comes with, right? So you get insights, you get command line assistant, you get all the functional pieces of RHEL. It's not like we give you something that's half broken. Literally this week, we announced another developer subscription called Developer for Business Developers, or actually it's called RHEL for Business Developers subscription. And so this addresses people who are like, well, I'm not an individual. I work for a company and I want to use RHEL for doing software for my company. And so developer for individual wasn't a good match because it's not meant for companies. It's meant for people.
Right.
So RHEL for Business Developers subscription says that you can get up to 25 boxes of RHEL for free, but it's limited in use to development and test use cases. So you can't use those boxes for your production, development and test only. But you register with a redhat.com ID and it gets put into your account. And now you have 25 free boxes of RHEL that you can use for development and test instances.
Right. So there's really no reason for a trial, right? Because you can get a full sub that lasts you a whole year. And then you can renew it at the end of that year, also for free, right? I've been using a Dev for Individuals sub for my home lab stuff. I know that sounds ironic because I work for Red Hat. I can get all the subs that I want. It's just less complicated because it's my own ID. I have my own little playground. I don't have to worry about, because our employee accounts, it's cross, it's organization wide, right? And everything I do for testing and for demonstrations and whatnot, it's all on a Dev for Individuals sub. It includes everything and it works really well.
Yeah, and like Nate, you also have access to another pool of subscriptions, but it's managed by your manager, and that guy, like, woof.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That manager Scott guy. All right. Do we have any other questions, or should we wrap this up? Anything anybody wants to see on my upgraded machine? I don't know. There's not much to it.
Yeah. So next week. We already have something picked out for next week, Nate, but I've forgotten what it is.
You're right. We do, but now I got to go see what it is.
Oh, it's you just walked into a new environment and they're like,
right,
fleet of boxes. What do you do to find out what that fleet of boxes does? How do you do like investigation to figure out what a system actually does?
Right.
Talking about a whole bunch of tools and like some recommended procedures for like investigating a system to figure out what it does.
Here's your network of systems you have to support. Now figure them out, because the last guy didn't leave any docs.
The last guy never leaves any docs.
No, or they had them all written down in a notebook and they took it with them.
Am I going to have to tell stories about Sean again? The lone wolf system admin that, like,
there you go.
I would run into his box. I never met the guy because he was like 4 admins before me. But whenever a system was really jacked up, I was like, I bet this was Sean. I'd look at the history on the machine, and sure enough, he would have been the last person that worked on that box.
Yeah, early in my career, I had two previous admins that I had never met. There was a Dave and there was a Martin, both of which I got to meet later because they came back to the organization. These are the sort of folks that wrote docs, but they wrote them in a way that someone who followed along couldn't really follow, right? So it was almost like not having any docs. So yeah, it was tricky.
So we'll be going into a whole bunch of tooling and like what things to look at and things like that. And then we actually, Nate, we have content for 2 weeks from now too.
We do, because 2 weeks from now I'm going to be out and Scott's going to handle one, right?
Oh man, everybody buckle up for that one. So we're going to be talking about regular expressions or regex that Friday. And so we will get deep into the weeds on developing.
Speaking of things no one else can read, right? Regular expressions.
Maybe I'll throw some Perl in there too, Nate, just for fun. All right. So hopefully you enjoyed our LEAPP upgrades. And now you can upgrade in place from RHEL 9 to RHEL 10, no problems. It turns out you can also LEAPP upgrade from 7 to 8 and from 8 to 9. So you can use this tool across a whole bunch of different versions of RHEL. So until next time, see you, everybody.
Everybody have a great one.